I think that the Texas Rangers will win the second wild card spot in the 2019 American League. Now, I know that might sound absurd to some people because a lot of people really thought the Rangers would be vying for the fourth place of the American League West, simply trying not to finish in last. But they've looked good this year. They have one of the strongest offenses in the league, an offense that for the entirety of the season has been top 3 in runs scored. Now, in order to understand why I think the Rangers can actually sneak into the playoffs, we have to look at their competition. So in the AL East, both the Yanks and Rays are very strong. One of them is going to win the AL East, the other will take the first wild card spot. The Rays look great, signing Charlie Morton, who's been incredible. He's a very underrated pitcher overall, a guy who got overshadowed a lot by Garrett Cole and Justin Verlander. The dude has a filthy curve. They also have Snell, of course, reigning Cy Young winner, very talented. Now the Yanks have had most of their team on the IL, aka the DL. No reason to change the DL to the IL, just to not offend people associated with the Special Olympics. Total clown show. Politically correct nonsense. But I digress. The Yanks are very, very good, even with Judge out, Stanton out, Didi out. Didi just came back, of course, and a plethora of other injuries. They basically had their whole roster on the IL. As far as starting lineup goes, you could have filled out a Yanks starting lineup with who was on the IL. But they've persevered and maintained they'll easily win 95 games. But the Red Sox, now this is really the cornerstone of the theory. The Red Sox are not nearly as good as they were last year. Craig Kimbrell is gone. Remember, before last year's playoffs, everyone was hailing Craig Kimbrell as an exceptionally talented closer. Some people are even saying that by the end of his career, he would be just below Mariano Rivera, right in that Mariano Rivera, Trevor Hoffman, God tier range. And of course, he didn't have a very good playoffs. They ended up using Chris Sale to close the final game of the World Series. And what do you know? Craig Kimbrell walked and just sat on his laurels for a couple months. Just now recently got picked up. Joe Kelly is now a Dodger. Joe Kelly was the second best member of the Red Sox bullpen. The Red Sox also are having Mookie Betts and JD Martinez underperform. Both of these guys were MVP caliber last year, and they haven't been bad, but they haven't been really that good either. Now, I think the Red Sox will probably finish with about 86, 87 wins. They're still a good team, but this isn't the 100-plus win juggernaut where everything sort of goes perfectly well for them and they're firing on all cylinders and look unbeatable. This is definitely not last year's Red Sox. They're a solid team, but they're not a juggernaut. The Blue Jays are a joke. They have Stroman, who they'll probably deal, and they're just basically building everything around Vlad Jr. The Orioles are a laughingstock. Remember, the Orioles, at the beginning of the year, were giving up so many homers where they were setting records, and of course, they have like Andrew Kashner, who had one good year with Texas. He had a 3.43 ERA, and he's like, "Oh, I'm an ace. I'm a legitimate number 2 guy." The Rangers, okay, let him walk. He's been terrible since then. Anyway, they have Kashner and Dylan Bundy and Chris Davis. They're not going anywhere. Now, the Minnesota Twins. This is a team that has had an exceptional amount of pop, a great offense. They've had very good pitching as well, and they've been a very consistent team with signings like Nelson Cruz and Marwin Gonzalez, in addition to Byron Buxton playing more consistently. This is a very scary team that gets to beat up on a lot of garbage teams. The Royals, they have speed and defense, but no pitching and no power. They get to play the Twins like 19 times a year. The Tigers, a rebuilding laughingstock. The White Sox, they've been absolutely atrocious for years. I think they'll probably win like 74 games. I think they'll win 74 games this year. And Tim Anderson is pretty good, but there's not a lot to write about on the White Sox. And remember, guys, the Twins get to beat the crap out of these 3 teams frequently, so they're going to get to farm a lot of easy wins. Now the Indians. This team is probably the main reason why I think the Rangers will be able to sneak into the wild card. Because let's assume that the Twins win the division. I don't think that's a very lofty assumption. I think the Twins will continue to do very well. They'll probably win 93 games, I would say. But why are the Indians just a couple ticks above 500 when they were in the World Series a couple years ago? It's because a lot of their core left. Michael Brantley is gone. Edwin Encarnacion, gone. Okay? They were both very powerful hitters, even though Brantley got hurt a lot. Encarnacion had a ton of pop. Brantley is sort of this fast guy that plays good defense and gets on base a lot. He's doing pretty well for the Astros. But this is the more important part. Clevenger, the long-haired, flame-throwing righty, hurt. Just recently came back, but he had a pretty significant injury. Corey Kluber, the Klubot, their Cy Young winner and ace, pretty severe injury. He'll be out for at least another month. Now, when you consider that they don't have either of those guys, those are huge holes to fill in the rotation. Now, when you think 2016 World Series contending, made it all the way to Game 7 in extra innings Indians, what do you think of? Andrew Miller, right? They're sort of can-do-it-all lefty reliever that would come in the middle of dirty innings and get him out of trouble. Basically unhittable to lefties. Great slider. Gone. They don't have Andrew Miller. They also had Brian Shaw, who is very good. He's gone. Their bullpen is very weak compared to what it was. When you think about when those Indians would make runs, you think, oh, well, Terry Francona has all these big bullpen arms to go to. So much of the playoffs in baseball nowadays is this bullpen-centric, very aggressive, sort of micromanaging bullpen use. The Indians don't really have as many weapons. It's like Brad Hand, and that's it. And as I pointed out before, their offense is way weaker. I think the Indians will win like 83 games. They might even go 500. And the West, the Astros are going to easily win this division, just like the Twins are easily going to win their division. Okay, so where does that leave us? That means that the Rays and the Red Sox are the biggest threat, with the Rays pretty much for sure going to be taking up the first wild card spot. Now, the Oakland A's got hot in the second half of last year. However, they're not as good of a team as they were last year, and even though they made it into the wild card game, we saw that they fell apart in a best-of-1 versus the Yanks. They don't have a legitimate ace. They don't have a real number one guy. If you recall, they were bringing in their ace closer, Blake Trinan, in like the 6th inning to try to stem the flow versus the Yankees. That sort of goes back to what I was talking about, where the MLB playoffs these days is a lot more about heavy bullpen use and how many arms you can go to in the bullpen. But if you don't have one legitimate, really good starter, it's really hard to win, especially in the best-of-1 wild card game. Because look at that A's game. They didn't have a legitimate starter. They had a lot of really good bullpen arms, but they were going to the bullpen in like the 3rd. And one thing that I noticed in last year's MLB playoffs is you have this situation where throughout the regular season you can bring in these relievers who are normally very effective, but in the playoffs there's more variance. The teams are better, they're more willing to play small ball, the other manager's more willing to do things like pinch hit and pinch run that he wouldn't really be doing as much in a regular season game, but he'll play more aggressive in a playoff game. And what basically happens is there's a much higher chance that these relievers are going to come into a game and be very nervous, and they're going to put themselves in a position where they're inaccurate or they're less effective than usual. So that's one thing that we saw in last year's playoffs. A lot of these extremely bullpen heavy strategies would run into the problem of a guy would come in and sort of be inconsistent and not be able to find his groove, whether he was nervous or whatever. But you would see managers would be in this mindset of, oh, I'll use everyone in my bullpen, and if I have to, I'll use all 9 guys. Well, 3 of the guys might be way more ineffective than you're used to. And I think if you want to win in the playoffs, you have to have an ace. That's just how it is. You have to have at least one legitimate number 1 ace. And remember, we're talking about the wild card here, so you just need 1 ace. It's a best-of-1. And Mike Minor has been a great pitcher for the Rangers this year. Throughout the entire year, pretty much, he's been top 5 in ERA and innings pitched. He's a workhorse guy who consistently goes deep into games. Now, the Rangers' bullpen is a problem. Really, it's Jose Leclerc, who lost his closer's job, and has been okay. He's looked like his old self. He's been used whenever he's been used as an opener or a setup man. He hasn't been slid back into the closer's role yet, but if the Rangers want any chance, he's going to have to go back to closing games and closing them well. He's a guy with a filthy changeup and an even better heater, and he's a legitimate threat. Now, the Rangers also have guys like Sean Kelly and Chris Martin, who are somewhere between average and below average. There's not a lot of good stuff there, but in terms of rotation, Lance Lynn has been a very effective number 2 guy, a hard thrower. Also, Adrian Sampson and Ariel Hirado are 2 young prospects that have been very good. Adrian Sampson today threw a complete game versus the A's. He allowed 1 run. Ariel Hirado looks like a young Bartolo Colon. He pounds the strike zone ruthlessly with that 2-seamer and rarely walks people. So I think the Rangers actually have enough starting pitching to win about 88 games. Now that's assuming that they don't keep starting Drew Smyly and Shelby Miller and these bums who really should just be cut. These guys like Drew Smyly and Shelby Miller are just, they're garbage. They have passed the point in their careers when they have any use at all, and they're complete dead weight. Now, if the Rangers can sort of develop a rotation of Hirado, Lynn, Minor, and Sampson, then they can actually string together wins. That's not a bad rotation. Might be a little unproven, but it's not bad. But if they keep starting Smyly, Smiley's the sort of guy who'll come in and pitch 4 innings and give up 7 runs. He's a butcher. He's a very poor player. But the Rangers have a phenomenal offense. They've been top 3 in runs scored throughout most of the year. Nomar Mazara looks like he's going to come into his own. Now, for the last few years, Mazara's been a solid middle-of-the-lineup threat, but he really needs to take that next step into being the sort of 30-homer, 100 RBI guy and not just a guy who bats around 260. One thing that I've noticed with the Rangers is that when Mazara goes 0 for 4, the Rangers' win percentage is absurdly low. And I know that might seem sort of weird to say, like, oh, of course, like if someone goes 0 for 4, your win percentage is going to be low. But with Mazara specifically, if he can turn some of these 0 for 4 games that have caused him to always hover below 275, if he can turn these into 1 for 3 with a walk, that's going to provide a lot of thunder in the middle of the Rangers lineup. Especially when he's accompanied with Joey Gallo, a guy who has raised his batting average by about 60 points this year, an exceptionally powerful hitter, one of the strongest guys in the league, who actually plays great defense too. He can play the corner infield positions or outfield, and he's one of the most exciting guys to watch. Tremendous power, and the Rangers can use him in the middle of their lineup now that he's batting around 270 instead of 210. And he's a huge threat. He's got a lot of plate discipline built up. He was always a guy who was sort of walk, dong, or strike out. People would even, call him walk or dong. That's my nickname for him. But now that he's gotten that batting average up significantly, he's a true terror. He's not just this sort of weird, gimmicky Adam Dunn type that you throw a bunch of off-speed junk and he's going to strike out. Asdrubal Cabrera has been solid. Shin-Soo Choo is one of the best leadoff hitters in the entire league, an on-base percentage monster. Elvis Andrus continues to be a consistent middle-of-the-lineup guy who will get you about 20 homers a year and is going to bat 300 or better with good speed. Now, it is a little vexing that the bottom of the Rangers lineup is so weak. You take a guy like Ronald Guzman, who has legitimate Gold Glove defense. Ever since his injury, he's been a little hit or miss. He has good power, but he has a lot of 0 for 4, 0 for 3 days, strikes out a little too much, and his average is a little bit low. Now, the real heels of this Rangers lineup are the catcher spot and Rougned Odor. That $56 million deal that Rougned Odor signed that included a horse looks terrible right now. The dude is consistently batting below 200. He looks absolutely hopeless at the plate frequently. If you look at Rougned Odor's last 3 years, he's had about 2 good months, okay? Last year in July and August, he was pretty good, but he tapered off near the end of the year, and he was awful at the beginning. The year before that, of course, was one of the worst seasons ever for anyone who's played every single game. He played all 162 and was consistently dog shit. This is a guy who has horrific plate discipline. He led the league in errors at his position for 3 straight years, although he is sort of cleaning both of those things up. However, you can only really be optimistic on a guy for so long whenever he's consistently batting below 200 and appears to be extraordinarily undisciplined. He also makes a lot of really boneheaded moves, and he gets caught stealing all the time. Now, the catcher's position is a problem for the Rangers. Isaiah Connor-Falefa has been decent. He was a utility man last year. He's sort of learning the ropes from Jeff Mathis, who's always been billed as this defensive catcher who really works with the pitching staff well. Well, he's batting below 150, and he has one of the worst runner thrown out percentages in the entire league. So if he's a defensive catcher who can't throw anyone out, doesn't that just mean he's terrible? And it does. So hopefully Mathis teaches Isaiah Connor-Falefa the ropes, and he's gone at some point or just really isn't playing very frequently at all. He becomes the backup. When I say gone, I mean like next year. But he really just needs to impart all of his wisdom to Connor-Falefa, and hopefully that will help Connor-Falefa develop as a catcher, because Mathis is a black hole in the lineup. The guy gets an RBI single or an RBI sac fly, and it's like, oh my God, Jeff Mathis had a day. Meanwhile, everyone in the league knows they can run on him. Every single throw that he makes to second base is a rainbow. It's disgusting. Just a lollipop to second base. So slow. But the Rangers are an incredibly potent offense, especially if they can strengthen that bottom part of their lineup. Logan Forsythe has been solid. Willie Calhoun was great before he got hurt. Joey Gallo was great before he got hurt. Now both Gallo and Calhoun have insignificant injuries and will be back relatively soon. Delino DeShields got sent down, the speedster that plays great defense, but since he's come back up since the Gallo injury, he's got his groove back. Shin-Soo Choo and Delino DeShields have always been two guys that synergize very well together in the lineup, because Choo gets on base, Delino DeShields has the ability to put a lot of stress on the runners. Now almost always you're going to see Shin-Soo Choo batting leadoff because he's an incredible on-base percentage guy with pop. What you often see is Delino DeShields will be slotted in at ninth, and then that is sort of a cute little way to have them batting back-to-back, because then if Delino gets on, Choo is always watching a lot of pitches, taking the pitcher into deep counts, which of course allows Delino to wreak havoc on the base pass. Jeff Mathis is such a talentless bum that he's getting put at ninth. Rugi Odor's been batting 165 pretty much all year, so it's hard for the manager to sit there and say, oh, I'll put Delino at ninth, because you've got basically a fucking pitcher playing catcher as far as his ability to hit goes, so you have to put him at ninth. But you can still have Delino at second, and he still synergizes well with Choo even if he doesn't get on before Choo. I really like that. It also enables the Rangers to do a lot of different like bunt plays, hit and run, stuff like that. It gives Chris Woodward the ability to be creative. Danny Santana is a guy that does very well coming off of the bench, playing sort of a utility role. Both Santana and Forsythe have been an incredible addition to the Rangers this year. They've really helped fill in the gaps. Hunter Pence might actually make the All-Star team. He's been batting around 300 with pop for the entire year. That's part of why Willie Calhoun hasn't been up in the majors for the entire season. And thank God Carlos Tocci is in the minors this year and we don't have to deal with that nonsense anymore. Now remember, the Angels are a very bad team. They have ancient Albert Pujols. They have Mike Trout, that's pretty much it, a washed-up Matt Harvey, a bunch of other pitchers known for injuries, and the Mariners will probably set a record for errors committed this season. They're absolute butchers in the field. So if we consider that the Indians have their two best pitchers injured and don't have a catcher and have a diminished bullpen, the A's are sort of a flash in the pan, and they are already less talented than they were last year. Remember, Jed Lowry was like a god for the first 2 months of the season, and their ace was actually healthy. They're not going to win 90-plus games again this year. Really, it's going to come down to the Red Sox, and I don't think the Red Sox are going to find their old form. If Chris Sale starts to have nagging injuries near the end of the year again, and it's this big narrative, oh, Yanks versus Sox tonight, is Chris Sale going to be throwing an 89-mile-an-hour heater again? The Rangers could sneak in, and it's best of one. And Mike Minor is actually legitimately good enough to carry the Rangers through a best of one. Now, I'm not going to say they're going to go to the World Series or anything. When it comes to a best-of-5 series, the Rangers are going to be at a big disadvantage against the Yanks, the Rays, the Twins, and the Stros. But in a best-of-1, they could win. And furthermore, in this very top-heavy AL, the Rangers could actually sneak into the second wild card spot. Tell me what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And when you leave your comment, I want to hear who you think is going to win the divisions and, more importantly, the wild card, because I think pretty much everyone agrees who's going to win the division. So, it's been Venomous Stare. Like and sub for more.